Running Sentences presents Pirates, Politics, and Potentially Treasure. Book 1, Part 4, Into a Fire. While they've managed to escape from the asteroid, things do not get any calmer for any of them. Cordite finds himself in a lot of crosshairs and trying to get away from such things. Story is written and narrated by Michael Henry. This is a work of fiction. Any names, characters, businesses, events, and situations within this story are products of the author's imagination. Any resemblance to real people, real situations, events, characters, businesses, and/or fictional businesses, characters, events, and so on is purely coincidental. Copyright 2023, Michael Henry. All rights reserved. The transport ships were soon out in space, having found that their tether to the mothership was broken. To be safe, they headed for the last known location it was pulling them towards, so that they could know how strong the signal and pull was, although the ships were gone, so it never amounted to anything, so they went willingly to find empty space, just to be safe. There were a few communications lines opened up between the transports and Ophelia's big ship, and they were soon puttering off to find that boat, which also was closing in on their location. As the last of the transport disembarked its group of passengers, Cordite was the last one off, and onto a metal platform. That vessel was soon jettisoned off, as he found himself guided by armed guards towards a hallway where the rest of those had been collected. At the doorway, however, he found himself plucked away by Ophelia, who waved away the guards. A few tried to stay, looking concerned, but she kept waving them away. "Mr. Cordite, what are your plans now that you're safe?" "Oh, well, I was headed for a planet unknown to quietly disappear. Why?" "After all that's happened, do you think that you'll be allowed to do that? The Grogian ship randomly disappears after the attack pirate outpost and leaves all of its soldiers behind. You think a quiet life is what's left for you. They're not known for just leaving." He shrugged as he looked about the landing bay. It was now empty of transports and was an incredibly simple space. It consisted little more of a hallway with a grated metal walkway encompassing the much larger hangars which ships could dock to. Those ships that had been used were merely brought along the gateway ports that extended out and allowed one safely aboard without having to do a complete depressurization. He was looking at all of this in the hope that his mind could find an answer among all of this, though it did not seem very likely. "I was merely going along with everything since it seemed simpler ever since I ran into those two Grogian royals, who were caught up in some escape pod or something. I don't know. I don't have a current plan." "About them, those royals you're talking about, they had a pretty penny on their heads." "Yeah, I heard about that, and I found out as I turned them over to the Navy, who then promptly turned around and began chasing me ever since then. They decided I was a pirate and thus was worth destroying." "You're not." He finally looked back at her with a sigh. It was complicated to come up with a clean answer that yes and no, or simply no, would be easier. It was space after all, and most of space was uncontrolled, and what you did and didn't do, and what you did to survive, was all up to you, and survival was always the name of the game. You know what life is like out there, out here actually. And to change the subject, what is up with your ship? How do you have this?" The gaze which he'd been casting around the large space came back to her smirking face. "It is giant, a former cruiser of a former government that sold it for scrapping. I managed to weasel my way into buying it once everyone had washed their hands of it at a scrapyard. They didn't really want to scrap it, and money came their way." "Why would you ever need the help of a lowly salvage crew to come to your rescue when you have this?" "Well, things happened, and we got caught in a bad situation where this vessel wasn't actually available to us at the moment. Thankfully you were. Now I have an offer to make you, if you're willing to listen." Cordite crossed his arms. He'd been expecting such a thing to happen, and he wasn't sure. He was happy to hear his fears confirmed. What could she even offer him at this point? He was already in her debt, so whatever it was probably wasn't good. You'll have to take up the offer with my crew. I'm supposed to be retired. Anything I do is, well, off the books. I'm no longer a salvager. It isn't about running a pirate ship for me or anything like that. Then what is it? There have been a lot of on and off fighting between many pirate factions and other factions, both pirate and government-sponsored sort of situations. I want it stopped. He felt his eyebrow arch in curiosity. She surely couldn't be contemplating bringing back the long-dead idea of representation, right? It had been tried and never worked well, plus the person sent before the galactic government either wound up in jail or killed, although the new president may not be so against the idea. And if I say no right away? You don't have much of a choice in the matter. You owe me, and it's either you do this or I send you out into space. She swept her hand to the side, towards one of the nearby air-locked doors. It would lead out into space, undoubtedly, but there could always be a bluff in there somewhere. Just so I'm on the same page as you, this is about being a representative for pirates to the galactic government, right? Yes, and I have it on good authority that several factions will respond well to anyone I put forward for the job. All I need is a majority, which shouldn't be too hard to get. Okay, that's great, I think. Not sure, but why me? Well, it wasn't going to be you. In fact, I wasn't even going to put anyone forward at the next big meeting of pirates. But you are fairly well, you've managed to make yourself known to both sides lately for your work, and, well, no one likes you. Thus, you are a perfect person for such a position, as you are the middle ground. The worst spot to be in the world, and yet the most powerful when things need to be done. He frowned at the news, since it didn't sound nice to his ears. What could he do, though? Do I at least get a little time to think this through? Maybe a few hours, if I'm nice. She had begun moving off and waved him to follow, where the others had gone. The crowded cafeteria he was directed to by a couple of sailors was, well, a jumbled mess of aliens. It reminded him of his old days of working on various ships and jobs that took him across the far and wide galaxy. He moved towards his own group, who he saw mostly settled down on a long, rectangular table. His approach did not go unnoticed by his crew, who turned to him. What was that about? A job offer I cannot refuse, Lion. That's not much of an offer, then, is it? He nodded a bit reluctantly to Mott. There was no denying that was true, but it felt better to not have it framed in such a manner. And it is one I will have to take because of that. What even is it that you're being offered? Representative before the galactic government for pirates. Yeah, it's madness. No one wants that kind of job. Yep, Mr. Plate, no one wants it, and that's why they have to hand it to someone no one likes. There were a few other rumbles and grumbles and murmurs about this, but it all fell silent a moment later. Ophelia had jumped up onto a nearby table and stood for a moment waiting for silence to fall. It took a minute, but once the aliens began to notice her, they all actually fell silent. Aliens of all types, welcome aboard my ship. I am Captain Ophelia Nettle, and you have all been brought aboard as potential crewmates. Some of you will work out, and some of you will be dropped off at the nearest port. Any objections? Yes, release me at once. She looked over at Captain Tree, tucked against the corner of a wall, bound up with handcuffs, and 2 guards to either side. No, you are of use to me. I'm not sure where exactly you'll be of use, but maybe you will be. Other than that, the rest of you, settle in, aside from the crew under Captain Cordite. She looked over at the table that Captain Cordite was sitting at with his crew surrounding him. The filled cafeteria went back to talking mostly amongst themselves as she jumped down. She was gone from view for a matter of few seconds before she appeared before the table which Cordite was at. How goes things? About as well as one could expect when getting things dumped upon them. Lovely. I don't have room for any of you aboard my ship. Pirates mingle with other pirate crews, tend to start fights and all of that. You have the cargo space, for now, and I'd rather avoid having our crews mingle too much, so I'm giving your crew the same offer that I have for Cordite. How would all of us be representatives, Miss Ophelia? The cat-like grin slid across her face, as most amused by that thought. Well, I don't expect that at all, Miss Doctor, I think it was. Maybe a few of you pretending you're from different factions, helping him out, or I don't know. But most of you would act as guards or some other crew. They must be kept around or something. It's up to you to figure it out. Not my problem. There was a steady look of apprehension about this, like she was asking too much of the aliens, who liked things simple. Cordite knew that they liked to keep things in such a state in their lives, and politics was one of those things that just put up obstacles to getting jobs done. And that meant all jobs. You can drop those that don't want this on the next planet, though, right? My crew included. Why? I think you should go with your entire crew. Well, you're already doing that, and consider it a favor to the person you're putting in power. Also, you know as well as I do that not everyone wants to be involved in such messes, politically wise. She made a face at him in response, showing her displeasure at the reminder, but then composed herself so that she looked mostly normal from what he could tell. I will take it under consideration, I suppose. Well, it's part of my requirement for accepting such a terrible post. You know there is give and take on these things. I would like you to give on this. You can't have everything your way in this world. A sailor had approached from behind her and came to a clipped stop, clicking their heels together. Then a deep bow was given as she turned to look over at the intruder on their conversation. A moment of looking at them led to a recognition of one of her senior officers who did a bit of everything around the ship. There is a rapid approaching pirate vessel that seems to be intent on heading to the asteroid. They have held us with a question about a certain someone. The sailor glanced towards Cordite, which made Ophelia look at him, and look both annoyed and curious at this news. It appears that the ship belongs to Captain Zull. What do you wish to do? I will talk to them then, and Mr. Cordite is coming with me to the bridge. We shall sort this matter out, right, Captain? Sure, I have some talking to do to that captain who got me into this mess. The rest of you stay here and decide what you will do. I highly recommend that you do go along with our idea, though, of becoming representatives. And with a warning glare, she turned and went off as Cordite did his best to catch up to her. A busy bridge greeted them when they got there. Cordite dodged out of the way of a couple of sailors and ducked a low-hanging sign saying Bridge of the Flying Squirrel. To this he glanced at Ophelia, who had ignored it and seemed rather happy to stand at her command post. She had an overview of all that was going on before her. How are things going? Are we prepared to take off? Engines warm? We're headed to the port of Syntax 1, are we? Her comments were met with nods as the work continued, but there was no firm response. Cordite was standing further back and away from everything, even though the area was pretty spacious and well laid out. No one should run into one another here, yet he had already gotten in the way of other aliens. The communication screen dropped in front of Ophelia with an image of Captain Zull on it. Apologies for interrupting your day as I see you're getting ready to leave, Flying Squirrel. I heard there was a fight between pirates and the navy of the Grogian Empire or something like that. I came to lend assistance to whoever might need it, or whoever will pay. That battle is already over from what I can see. The Navy fled along with any sailors or soldiers they sent to fight. That is most shocking to hear. Yes, it really is. I don't know why. Maybe they weren't actually prepared to fight or something. But that isn't what caught my interest. You asked about Captain Cordite. Yes, he owes me money and we had a bet going, which he failed at. I heard he was in the area as well. And as you know, pirates and money go together. So a chance for fun and to get paid and to settle some debts. I heard you might know of him. She was curious about this, and she turned to look over at Cordite and made a come-over motion with her hand. He was reluctant to do so, as he was more interested in what was playing out than getting involved. The idea of talking to this man, which had seemed so great in the cafeteria a few minutes ago, now seemed rather dubious, as he wasn't even sure he had anything to even say. Despite this, he found himself moving forward until he could be seen by Zol, who raised an eyebrow at the sight. You ran away first from the site, if I remember, and no one, as far as I know, got to salvage that ship, which was part of the bet. Therefore, your little scheme of using me as a distraction, which I'm pretty sure I worked out, so you could steal stuff, hasn't panned out, and the debt is off, and the bet is off. You still owe me from before, though. Let's consider ourselves even then, since you abandoned me. You don't want to oppose the person who's about to go before the galactic government, do you? Whatever do you mean? Cordite pointed his thumb towards Ophelia. I'm putting him up for the position of representative to the galactic government, and before you complain about rash actions, it is something we've needed for a long time. The attack on the asteroid might have been avoided had we had such a representative before us. The face on the screen flickered with annoyance and glanced away to compose themselves, then looked back with anger in his eyes. I will oppose any such nomination. Oh, feel free to do so. You won't find much support for it, though, as I have already moved to make sure that anyone I put forth will go forward. But please do try. It will be amusing to see what happens. And before you log off, Zol, what did you want aboard that ship, that cargo ship, that Grogian cruiser, whatever it was? The paperwork? Some files? Something else? Why do you think I wanted something? You wanted a salvage job, and you don't go after a freshly destroyed ship without there being something aboard that you probably are desperately after or wanted. I know you enough and your tricks to see that you were going for something. Well, we can talk about such things another time. Perhaps if you can actually manage to get this position, we can have a chat about it. Until then, though, my business is mine, alone. He logged off, leaving a blank screen before them, which soon dissipated and the screen went away. Ophelia wasted no time in turning to Cordite with a curious look on her face, but said nothing as she put her hands on her hips. She was awaiting his comment on the matter. Zol made a bet when we were at the planet Dragor between us about who could get to a wrecked ship first and begin salvaging it. He gave me minor details, and looking for one last score before I retired, and because my crew needed a good payday, I agreed. And the debt before that? Money to help slip past some unsavory aliens looking for handouts and who were holding up a potential scrap deal. Oh, yeah, I think that's what happened. Nothing major, though. He shook his head no. Don't think so. But you never know with politics these days. Maybe that'll hold everything up. There was a moment when she studied him hard, taking in what he'd said before letting out a sigh. It was not a happy one, but she seemed to have accepted his words. With that, she turned and waved her hand at the control room before her. Let's get out of here. To the planet Syntax 1, please, and put a hurry on it. We have sailors aboard who will have to figure out if they are suited for our needs or not. There was a slight jolt as the ship let go of its mooring holding it in space, as it began heading off. A quick question. You aren't going to jump, are you? The ship jerked with a much heavier feeling this time, as things went blurry for a second before settling down again. The windows showing the outside revealed a vastness of space before they were nothing more than a blur of white and black intermingled with one another. The plush, overstated office that held the president of the Grogian Empire was made to look static and unchanging in its appearance, pristine and clean, and nothing would ever be touched there, more of an office for theatrical appearances than anything else. But the president of Vivok sat in a chair behind the desk, with his vice president, Vic, behind him, both with fake smiles on their faces. A camera was recording them for a few seconds more before its red light turned off. The automated session of photo for the newly re-elected president and vice president were now over. Evok turned to his companion and growled, "What happened with the Navy ship?"
"An attack on it, which we are settling right now. 2 royals were aboard, and they should be home shortly." "And why were they attacked in the first place?"
The president got up from his chair and stretched out, since it was an uncomfortable place to sit. His long body moved without much movement, making the stretching odd since it required so much movement. "Your planned orders put them there, sir."
"Did they now? Why would I do that?"
He had begun moving, taking steps towards leaving this office with impatient, quick steps. Vic did his best to keep pace, but was a few paces behind.
"It was part of the Operation Lost Beacon that we set up. You wanted a way to bring about changes. It was our get-out-of-the-way scheme that we tossed about and you okayed one night." "Remind me what it was." "Take out certain people within the power structure and use those attacks to say that other forces were acting against us. Mainly,
Having gotten to the door, Evok paused, nodded that he knew something of this, and his nose was pointed into the air, sniffing about for facts in his memory.
"Does anyone know about these tasks?"
"Not so much, no. There was talks here and there, and now we have a price on certain people's heads in order to get what we wanted." Stepping out into the hallway, Evok glanced about to see if anyone was around. There was no one, and so he stepped fully out into it.
"Do we know where the targets are now?"
Yes, I said they should be flying back home aboard one of our ships shortly." There had been a few brisk steps taken by the president, which now came to a lurching stop. He swung about to face Vic with a penetrating stare of disgust.
"We are doing what now? The whole idea, what you told me and what I remember, was to make them go away, and you are bringing them back here where they might talk?"
"Well, there's little choice in the matter without bringing in more people into the plans. I'm more than willing to do so, sir, but I wanted to make sure that you knew what was going on." Having started marching forward again, Evok had his nose in the air and was putting on the most regal of looks in case anybody was watching. This was all below him, and he wanted to make sure that Vic would know that just by his nose in the air.
"Well, do what you must, and I have to remain in the clear on most of this, since that's what we agreed upon. Plus, I have to see the King and Queen daily these days. They're always up to something. Guess I'll have to go minor memory wipe myself before I see them later, just in case my mind thinks of something and they can hear it." Princess Tulis moped about her room that had been given to her. It was in her estimation more of a cell than a room aboard this ship, since there was so little here. She had a bed and a desk and nothing electronic to look at or at least let her communicate with the outside world. She sat upon her bed, staring at the doorway, wishing it would open, so that she would soon be freed of this mess. When it did open that second later, she nearly jumped out of her skin as her brother Nero came in with some guard. "Sister, we're almost home, and this bad trip is just about over." "Home? But we were promised to see space."
"Another time, I guess. Mother and father are worried about us, so we must return to them, and, well, I don't know. And then we will go out and see the world, maybe."
Yes.
"We are sending a small transport with you aboard to take you home to the planet. No full docking at the space station. Are you ready to go, miss?" She nodded, though. As she got up, something felt off in the back of her mind. There was a sneaking worry that this guard was going to try something. A look towards her brother told her that he seemed to have this similar thought.
"Well, I guess you should show us the way, then."
There was a curt nod from the guard. A man who swung about and just simply left the room. In a hurried step, meet a pig-like creature and attaché for the public relations, dealing with
in and throughout the Galactic Empire, made his way down a busy hallway. His target was the attaché for assigned representatives within the government, and she was taking up her leisurely time walking and talking with someone. Meat didn't bother checking who it was as he hurried up to Bottle, the person he wanted, getting to her and then standing patiently until she realized he was there. "Yes, what is it?" "There is a private, very concerning matter about a certain group." "Which one?" "I would say the one that no one likes, but you would reply that is every government, and then where would we be? They are the ones that go about taking whatever they want." Her looks of really told him that his subtle answer had gone over well, but he couldn't go about announcing these types of things in public without prior approval. They first had to be dealt with behind the scenes to make sure it was all appropriate and that no one was going to object too much. "I think it would be better if we went to your office or somewhere else quiet. This is a discussion that needs some delicacy, and we don't want the entire government to get into a panic over things." She looked about and spotted a nearby conference room and signaled with exasperation that Meat should follow her. The person who they had been talking to had merely bowed and went away. This door to the conference room was opened with quite a clatter, thanks to it being stuck. The dust they kicked up from opening it and going into the room was on the rather impressive side of things as they coughed for a moment, letting things settle down in this unused space. The alien Bottle, almost bottle-looking kind of creature, turned to look at him with her wispy-like state of simply being. "Well, Meat, what is it now?" "You know the directive that our Lord and Savior, the High Leader of the Galactic Confederation and President of it all, has put out? The one about pirates and being allowed to talk to one another?" She paused and thought about it, rubbing her memory before seeming to give a nod. "Yes, they were given a chance to nominate a person to represent them here, something like that. Have they actually taken this offer up? That's absurd. It would be foolish to do so. It wasn't a serious offer." "Rumors point to yes, they have, and that someone might actually be coming to fulfill that position." "Why would they do that? These stupid pirates think they really can have a say in government affairs?" Unsure of what to do, Meat shrugged his shoulders as she looked on and considered what to do. When it became apparent that that was all he was going to offer, she looked away. "Shall we at least warn our bosses of this news?" She gave him a sharp look to warn him away from this idea. "No, that is the last thing we want before we know for sure that these types of things are true and that we are to tell anyone about them. We will hint at the possibility and tell them we are looking into matters, but no more. Understood?" He nodded as she fumbled trying to yank the door open, as it had stuck again. A bumpy landing greeted Zul aboard his little transport ship as it touched down on the asteroid that had just been attacked. The doors opened and he strolled out, taking in the sight of burning buildings and that citizens were mostly ignoring the wreckage all around them. He strolled a bit away from his ship with a few of his pirates tagging along behind him. There was no one here to greet him, which was unusual, until he saw a scurrying sight of one such alien coming out looking rather frazzled, holding a clipboard and fried hair a bit. "Hello, do you have an approval flight plan to land here?" "I've never needed one before. What's changed since the last time I was here?" Things around here have become more organized, though we now seem to be missing a few important people. I know the head of the landing port organized has up and vanished. Do you happen to know Francis Blood?" There was a reluctant nod after a few seconds' thought about that from Zul. The two began marching towards the office building. "I knew of him. I never met him personally, I think. Why?" "Well, he was working here and knows how everything runs. Now, after the attack, he seems to have vanished." "I doubt the Grogians got to him." "There's a chance. I doubt the Grogians got him, but they might have. The troops did recently just up and depart for no reason. Though there was one of the big ships that did depart from the outer landings. I don't really know what's going on." So maybe he was aboard that, maybe he took this chance to leave out of boredom or something?
You mean the moorings for the big ship outside of the majority of the asteroid field?
Meep nodded his head yes as they arrived at the doors to the office. Can you at least tell me what brings you to port?
That I can. There's a research to be done to bringing down a bunch of idiots with bright ideas. Cordite found himself directed to the quarters that his old friend Francis had been given in the cargo space and knocked on the door. He had a few questions and a brilliant plan which would likely fall apart in a matter of moments. Still, he had to express it and see what would happen and how his alien friend might react. The door opened to the simple chambers consisting of bunk beds and several desks and trunks for storage. There was no one in the room aside from Francis, who looked up when he came in, as it was used by several sailors, but it seemed that right now only he was inside. Why is it a sudden shudder of fear goes through me whenever you pop up? You should get the doc to check that out if that's the case. You heard what's been offered to me, right?
Yeah, word has snuck its way around. You taking the job?
Yes, sort of. I don't have a choice, but I've come up with an idea that I think will work, and I want you along with me. I want you to come with my group, if you don't mind. Better than dealing with Ophelia, I think.
Why do you want me?
I was figuring you would be a much better representative who is able to talk to government people. I would be more of the figurehead that everyone sees and talks about, and you the actual person who gets things done. They stared at one another for a moment, trying to make sure that they had a basic understanding of what was being said. Francis shook his head no after a moment and averted his gaze. And how would that actually work? No real idea. Well, people accept you more than they accept me, so it would only be a matter of time before they skip trying to talk to me to talk to someone who they actually will get things done. That would be you, because you actually get things done. What do you think? The long, drawn-out sigh he gave, that was the response, was a good indication of what the alien thought of it. Cordite wasn't discouraged by this, though, since his friend had a tendency to come around to ideas and things. Well, I will be coming with you, since I've always wanted to see the planet that he used for the capital. But for the rest of it, anyone will go along with it, but it'll be fun to see, maybe. Yes, we shall definitely see. He turned to leave, Francis alone in the room again, but his old friend cleared his throat. How's your health holding up, by the way? Stopping, Cordite turned to him, looking over his shoulder. He didn't speak at first, having looked down to think for a moment before coming up with an answer. I was told I would die if we jumped across space. I'm still here, and I'm not sure why. Things will probably catch up to me soon enough, which means it's a good thing to have a backup representative in you. With that, he exited the room. A few days' cruise took them to the nearest planet, with Cordite and crew collecting in the docking bay, waiting for the transport to be fully ready. It was a rust bucket of one that made Cordite believe it was being pushed off on them, since the crew had actually managed to keep one or two of the groggy Navy ones after a bit of an argument. He stared at Ophelia as she moved about, with one of her officers dealing with the last of getting ready to set off. There were a few nods, and then she broke off, heading straight towards him. I know you don't like me, but it seems like you want us dead if you're sending us off in that thing. Oh, it's the best it could be offered at the moment. Plus it is big enough to take all of those that aren't suited to join us. And you're taking one of the better pirates to sail space. She glanced over to the slightly hidden Francis under a cloak off to the side. This made them both aware that the man was trying to hide himself, and was not doing a very good job of it. And what of Captain Trey? Is he to be your hostage, or are you getting rid of him with me? I don't see him here, and it would be incredibly smart to have him thrown in with us. I think I'd rather keep him for now. You never know when a Grogian Empire might show up.
They seem to have a tendency lately to do just that, so it might be good to have something in that regard. Lately, you've been running into them before this? That whole you saving us thing? Yeah, that was caused by them. Good job gone wrong and all that. Anyway, your ship is ready and you should be off. He moved towards the clunker transport without saying a further word. It was a great temptation to actually say something further
and move the conversation along.
But as she had said, they needed to move along, and delaying that was not really a great idea. With a patter of steps, Nero and Tullus were led to a room that they rarely got to see. This was the grand throne room, where only the most amazing events were allowed to happen. It was decked out in the finest cloth with the most amazing rugs, and everything it offered was plush and comfortable, and just seemed like a great space to be in. The doors which they had been led up to opened without even making a noise, and inside they could already see Mom and Dad sitting on their thrones looking down on them. The room was mostly empty aside from them and a few advisors, as the two were directed inside. "Hello, Mom, Dad." The glances from their parents were ones of annoyance that did not convey happy feelings. Still, the two youngsters, though 20 and 22, pressed onward, up to the stairs that led them to the back of the room, and up to the great chairs where the parents sat upon. The two would come to a stop at a landing halfway up to the top of the room, and stared up at their parents. "I have heard you two have had a journey." "Yes, Father, the transport we were aboard was attacked. We barely escaped with our lives." A cold, insipid silence followed as they felt themselves being judged. Tullus kept trying to decide if she should take a step forward or backwards, and rocked between the two as a result. "Stop it with the little movement you do, Tullus. It is abhorrent to see, and it makes you look weak." "It does not, Mother." "What I say goes, and since I said it does, that means it does." There was a flash of anger from Queen Strand's eyes as they went red for a moment before returning to their white and green look. "You have been saved, and for that we are thankful. Even though you are not in line to inherit any part of the Empire, it is good to see you alive. We wish you prosperity and happiness on you. Now that we have all that said, is there anything you wish to say in return?" "I'm sorry, are you throwing us away or something? What is going on?"
"Certainly not, son. Merely telling you to go away since you are unimportant to the grand scheme of our lives and what is going to happen with our kingdom."
"But what if something were to happen to Fred or Calus, our brother and sister?" The Queen shot out of her chair, arms raised, finger pointed towards them. It shook a bit as she tried to keep some cool and calmness to herself. "Why would that happen? You two have plans, don't you? We should have gotten rid of you two long ago." "Calm down, dear. These two aren't the types to do such things. They are too sweet and too gentle and too uncoordinated. That's why they aren't cut out for any roles on our planet, remember?" The king had stood up and gently lowered his wife back into her seat. She went, but looked terribly displeased with all of this. I repeat my question. Are you throwing us away after what has happened to us?" "Yes. We have no need for you. Whatever you choose to do from now on is free of us. You are no longer our concern. You are no longer of our blood." The grand doors opened behind them, and the two youngsters barely registered and noticed, except that both the Queen and King now looked beyond them. The siblings turned to see the newly re-elected president strolling his way with a grand smile and his long arms held out wide before him. "What a lovely sight to see! Is there anything better than family? A family that loves you and wants you?" "Nonsense, Tullus, those types of families don't exist. Now is not the time to talk of that, though. I'm here to secure the government for the next cycle of years and so on, with the royals' approval, of course."
Yes, that again.
You already know you have permission to run the government. Go away and take these kids with you.
Having not made it too far into the room, Evok gave a deep bow and then made his hurry-up motion to Tulis and Nero. Confused, the two followed after a moment's look to their parents. Just outside the doors, as they shut, Evok turned to his new companions with a dirty smile that spread across his face. If he'd heard correctly, these two were no longer needed, and that could work out well for him. His thoughts were going at high speed towards his goal.
How are you two?
The siblings were familiar with President Evok and his slimy ways of getting things done. It felt wrong to allow this man to be so close and friendly in some form. We're fine? Good, Tulis. Great. I have a deal for you that will get you far, far away from here, and I think you want to get far away from here. Do you want that? Nero looked to his sister, who shared the same skeptical look that he had, in confusion and fear, and both taking a step back away from this man. Neither liked the sound of this.
End of Part 4, Book 1
of Pirates, Politics, and Potentially Treasure. Thank you for listening.